Hello, my name is Dean Contover. This is the Current Buzz. Thank you for watching today. We have a town employee, Jen Melanson.
Yes.
Today, she's a LSWA, and I looked that up too.
I have an update to that too.
Oh, do you? Oh,
I do.
I want to hear that. Licensed Social Worker Associate. Now, does that mean you've got elevated to full-blooded licensed social worker?
Yeah, so I actually just completed my master's degree, so I'm now an
Congratulations.
MSW, which is a Master of Social Work.
Okay.
And I'll be taking my clinical licensing exam as soon as I get my physical diploma from my university that I graduated from.
Oh, good. And what was it, the university?
That was Regis College.
Regis College. That's good. Yeah, they have a good, I think they have an online.
It was an online MSW program. It was a
MSW,
terrific program.
Yeah, Brandeis has a good one physically, my understanding. Yeah, so Community Service Coordinator.
Yep.
Thank you for working in town since 2019. And I'm
My pleasure.
I'm going to ask you a lot of questions because I have a lot of questions. Because what does a Community Service Coordinator do?
Yeah, it's a big job. It's a
No
lot
doubt.
of different things. And I was really lucky that because I'm the first person in this position for Chelmsford, that I've been able to build the position sort of as I have seen that where the needs are in the community and build the position around that. Exactly,
Right.
exactly. So that made things a little bit difficult for me to start because there wasn't sort of a framework for me to follow. But it's also been nice to have that freedom to be able to identify issues in town and try to prioritize what some of the bigger issues are and go after those first. So, but in general, my role encompasses a lot of different work from working with other town departments, including police and fire, first responders. I work closely with the senior center, with other departments in town hall, such as the Board of Health and fire prevention, and even with the clerk's office and sometimes the building department. And all of those departments sometimes become aware of an individual or a family that have some sort of social service needs, and then they will funnel them through to me to see if I can help.
Now, do you go to their homes or do you call them up or
all of the above.
All the
Yeah,
above?
yeah.
Okay.
They can come to me at my office. I will do home visits. COVID has sort of made that a little bit of a challenge this year. But I do a lot of phone and even sometimes some Zoom video work with folks as well.
Okay. Home learning, that's the big thing that I want to know. What's happening in regards to the kids' mental health and the parents' mental health? Is that big?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, COVID has impacted everyone. I have noticed in the past year since the pandemic started that I've received more referrals and more calls for consult from the social workers and guidance counselors in the school system in general. I think it was in the fall, just before COVID hit, I was just starting to get introduced to those folks in the school system and get to know them. And then once COVID hit, it was sort of all hands on deck and everybody was trying to pull from whatever resources they could. So, in general, the guidance counselors and the psychologists and the social workers in the schools are excellent. They're terrific at addressing students and families' needs, and I'm always impressed with how hard they work and how far they go. And so sometimes by the time they get to me, they contact me, they've done almost all of the work that I would have done anyway. But sometimes we get lucky and maybe there's a connection that I have or a resource that I have that I can add that can maybe make things transition a little bit more smoothly for whatever student and family that they're working with. But we work very cooperatively.
Oh, good. I mean, when someone has a daughter or son, they've never had mental problems in their family before. How do they get in touch with you? What do you say? Maybe some parents don't want to admit it.
Yeah, that's a common thing. And I like to think that because of the pandemic, we're being a little bit more open to that these days. I think there's been so much in social media and in print and TV media that has highlighted the impact of the pandemic on folks' mental health. And so I like to think that people are a little bit more cognizant of the fact that, mental health issues are on the rise because of the pandemic, and that it's okay to reach out for help. I like to think that we're normalizing it a little bit more. It's definitely not where I would like to see it. I would love to see mental health be as important to people as physical health is, because they're very intertwined.
Good point.
You know.
Very good point.
But if someone wanted to get in touch with me, they could either call me at my office, or they could email me, or they could drop into some open office hours that I have. And the contact can be as little or as much as they need. It could be, a simple anonymous question over the phone that they have for me, or it could be as much as maybe I meet with them, several times over a period of time until we get them hooked up with the services that they need.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. So, so let's say if my child has a problem, do you send them to somebody to see?
Yeah, so I think what you're asking is I'm mostly a referral-based service.
Right. Okay,
And that's
got it.
because I'm, one person in the department for a
Right.
town of over 35,000 people.
At this moment.
Yeah, at this moment.
Yeah.
And so that's, to have a caseload of 35,000 people is pretty big for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't do really intensive work with folks one-on-one in most cases. So what I try to do is get a sense of whatever issue is going on for the person and then connect them to the right resources that can go a little bit more in depth with them. So if you had, say, a daughter that was at the high school who was maybe having some depression and anxiety symptoms, and you called me, first thing I would do is to see how you're working and how your daughter's working with guidance in social work and psychology at the high school. Because I want to make sure that I'm not going to duplicate efforts that they've made, and I would ask for permission to be able to reach out to them and contact them and have a conversation with them and see where I might be able to help. So that would be my first step.
So, so the parents should get contact. You're on Facebook.
Yep.
You have an email address, right?
Yes.
Email address is
Email is jmelanson@chelmsfordma.gov.
.gov. Remember, it's .gov.
Yep.
Not it's ma.gov.
Yes.
And
And I believe there's a link to
phone
that
number?
on the town webpage as well.
okay. Do you have a telephone number?
I do. So I have a mobile phone number. That's 978-770-7687. And I also have an office phone number that's 978-254-0446. And the mobile number, people can text me as well. So if they're more comfortable texting rather than talking on the phone, sometimes it's a little bit easier for folks, then that's completely fine.
Give that mobile number out again.
Sure. 978-770-7687.
Sounds like my cell phone. So you're proactive and reactive too?
Absolutely.
Reactive would be if something happened in someone's home, physical assault, that would be reactive.
Right.
Is that right?
Right, right.
And your concerns about that too.
Sure. A good example is just recently I received a call from fire dispatch when they went out on a medical call, and they had some concern about the physical living space of the individual that they went out to help. Whether it be hoarding or clutter or maybe some unsafe, unsanitary conditions. So that would be an example of a reactive call where I would, in response to that, try to go out. Sometimes I'm able to go out at the same time that they're there and be able to access the home and also be able to talk to the individual as well. Other times it might mean follow-up. In this case, I was not available to go out to get to the resident's home. But I've been able to do some follow-up with some services that are working with the resident. So, and I'm intentionally being vague just to protect, confidentiality.
I understand. What about physical assault, whether it's on a husband or wife or son or daughter, vice versa? I mean, there's a lot of elements to that.
Right. If police were to go out on a call on a physical
That's the
assault,
one I wanna
a
hear,
domestic
yeah.
violence or something like that, they actually wouldn't call me because the police department has a terrific initiative working with them that they are in a sort of consortium with other towns called the Frontline Initiative.
Okay.
So they have a number of clinicians that work with them, and that initiative is shared with Billerica, Dracut, Tewksbury, Wilmington, and maybe Tingsboro.
Are they on call? Is that so? They have
They-
a beeper, or is that?
They actually physically serve in the police stations. So the clinicians rotate time in the
Oh.
various police stations, but they also, if there's a call for Chelmsford, but one of them is in Billerica, they'll still, answer that call, and they'll also do a lot of follow-up as well. So
I see.
that's been a terrific program that the police department has engaged in, and really very forward-thinking on the part of our police chief, Jim Spinney, with getting involved with that, because we're seeing more and more how impactful it can be when someone is having a mental health crisis and a clinician is able to respond to that with police. There's a lot of impact to that and a lot of good that can be done. And those clinicians also will follow up after the fact with the
That's important,
individual
isn't it?
and make sure that they're getting the help that they need. So it's not a one and done police call and
Well, that's good.
nobody knows what's going to happen
That
with
means
the person.
less police go into that particular home then, if it's
Potentially,
potentially. Yeah.
that's the potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're hired for.
Yeah,
as
so
community
they-
service coordinator.
Right. So the clinicians with the police department mainly handle substance abuse calls and mental health calls that come in through the police department. And then sort of anything else that falls under that social services umbrella would be covered by me. So if the police department goes out on a call for, I don't know, a breaking and entering or something like that, and they just happen to be talking to the homeowner and find out that they're not making ends meet and maybe their heat has been shut off or something like that, that's when they'll call me in to help the individual get connected to maybe fuel assistance and some other assistance that they might be eligible for to help, get them sort of, so it would be stuff that maybe is unrelated to the call, but that the police officer maybe finds out during the course of responding to a call.
Explain what fuel assistance is for some people who may not know.
Sure, there's actually a national program for fuel assistance. It's called LIHEAP, LIHEAP. And it's run regionally in this region by Community Teamworks Inc. out of Lowell. And previously, there's someone at the senior center, a volunteer that can process fuel assistance applications with senior residents, but anybody who was in senior age previously would need to go to Lowell to CTI to apply for fuel assistance. But when I came on board, it was one of the things that I wanted to take on was being able to apply for residents with residents so they didn't have to go to Lowell, because transportation can be a barrier for
that's true.
folks, So what fuel assistance does is it will allocate if the person, it's all income based, so as long as the person is eligible, per their income, their annual income, they'll be allocated a certain amount of money that will be applied directly towards their home heating bills.
Do they get the money, or is that paid to
No,
the,
so say somebody has oil heat,
Right.
the bills, the oil provider will send the bills directly to CTI
I see.
in Lowell. CTI will process the bill and pay out the fuel assistance.
as long as you're signed up for it?
Yes. If
and
there's
you
anything-
have to have identification too. You have to
Yep.
have proof
Yep.
that you
Yes,
live
there
at
are-
that address.
There are a number of
Yeah.
documents that are required
Right.
when we process the application, and I let folks know up front what documents they need to bring into me, so that we can make sure the application goes in smoothly.
Okay.
So,
I want to ask you this question. It's going to be a surprise to a lot of people in
Okay.
Chelmsford. Is there homelessness in Chelmsford?
there is homelessness in Chelmsford. Yeah, there's homelessness everywhere.
Okay.
So you can live in the most affluent, community you can think of, and there will be homelessness there. Homelessness in
Do
Chelmsford.
we have a number on it? Or is there-
It's hard to put a hard and fast number on it because homelessness looks different in Chelmsford than it might look in a big city like Worcester or Boston. Where you walk down the street and you've got people that you see that are living out on the streets. You don't see a lot of people living out on the streets in Chelmsford. The majority of people who are homeless in Chelmsford are either living in their cars or they're crashing on other people's couches.
I've seen the tent city in Chelmsford.
Yep, yeah, which is,
I
when
won't tell you where it is, but
and to say tent city, we're talking like 3 tents.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
we're not talking dozens.
it's
and-
not like dozens along the Merrimack River.
Exactly, and so that's not the majority of homeless people in Chelmsford. It's a small section, and it's
okay.
certainly a group that I work with.
Right.
But what's harder to identify are the folks that are living in their cars and that are, sleeping on this person's couch one day and another person's floor another day.
What do they
and
call it, couch surfing?
couch surfing. And the thing is, I think there are 2 factors that make it difficult to identify those folks. First, some of those people don't even recognize themselves as being homeless. They think because they're sleeping in someone's house with a roof over their heads that they're not homeless and they're not entitled to the same services as somebody that's maybe sleeping in the woods in a
point.
tent. The other thing is that there's stigma surrounding homelessness. And it's, can be very difficult in a town like Chelmsford, which is considered to be more affluent, to admit that you're
That's why I
homeless and
asked
that
the
you need
question.
help.
Right.
So there's definitely stigma around that, and it's a tough barrier to break down.
What age group would you say that mostly are homeless people are?
Yeah, so the ones that I work with most closely would be from mid-40s to about early 60s, approaching retirement age. Those are the ones that I most consistently work of. I'm aware of peripherally, the schools work with families who are homeless, experiencing
That's bad.
homelessness, and
That's not-
and
yeah,
and
it's too bad.
and so those would be younger folks. And every once in a while, I may come across somebody who's able to get a hold of me, who's maybe in their 20s or 30s or something like that. But really, kind of surprising for the most part. It's kind of in that 45 to, I'd say, 63.
And it's not all drug addicts, as
No,
the perception.
that's a vast misconception amongst people that homelessness, everybody that's homeless is a drug addict, and that drug addiction is a cause of homelessness. So it's a lack of housing that's a cause of homelessness.
Voila, you have
Yeah.
said it, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
It's
So-
not to say there can't be drug, any sort of substance
Yeah.
use, but it's not what I see predominantly.
I see.
And it's not the cause of why people are
I
homeless.
see. Another question regards where they call it food deprivation? Or,
Yeah,
What's
Food
is it- do
insecurity.
that's a new term.
Food insecurity, yeah. So that's something that's very, very high on my radar and has been a priority of mine from
Good for
almost
you.
the start of me coming in. And that was as a result of very soon after I started in 2019, the Greater Lowell Health Alliance released their 2019-2020 Community Health Needs Assessment. It was a study that was conducted. They conduct it every 3 years, and they ask all of the communities in Greater Lowell to answer this health needs assessment.
Right.
And I was able to get a hold of that and the data specific to Chelmsford. And I was not surprised that the number 1 need that was identified by Chelmsford residents was more affordable housing. That's not surprising because there's a housing crisis across the state.
I think
So-
across the country.
Yeah, exactly. So that was not
Something's wrong.
but that was not surprising to me. But what was surprising to me was that the number 2 need, the number 2 priority that Chelmsford residents identified was increasing access to healthy foods. And when you think of Chelmsford, and again, a town that's considered to be relatively affluent, to think that people feel that they don't have enough access to healthy foods was a real eye-opener for me.
Are we talking about stores or just in general?
So it was broken down into stores, availabilities,
Right.
and then whether it was a financial reason why people couldn't access healthy foods. I think we know that in Chelmsford we're pretty well surrounded by major grocery store chains, and they're pretty well accessible. We have some. It's not great, but some public transportation that's able to get folks.
Do they help out with food?
The
Food pantries?
the grocery chains?
Yeah, the grocery chains.
Yeah, absolutely. They donate
do?
to our food pantry. They also donate to the weekly community supper Table for Plenty, can sometimes get some stuff from them. But what I was really concerned with was trying to get more healthy foods to more residents in the community. So right around this time last year, it was probably like early March last year, just as the pandemic was starting to hit, I had some raised bed vegetable gardens. I was able to get a pretty sizable grant from a company in town that, not a grant, but a donation, that helped cover the cost of having 6 raised bed vegetable gardens installed
you.
in the back parking lot behind Town Hall.
Is it fenced in now? Now that we've told everybody?
There are security cameras back there,
okay.
so people should be aware of that.
Okay,
But
that's good to know.
those 6 raised vegetable beds, I and a couple of volunteers farmed all last season, and all of the produce was donated to residents of Chelmsford, the Table of Plenty, and then the food pantry as well. And initially, when I designed the program, I had thought that there would be an income stipulation on who could get produce. But then the pandemic hit, and food insecurity was on the rise, as was unemployment, and people were just in tough straits last year. And so I decided whoever needs vegetables, they can come and get them, or they can pick them up from Table of Plenty. I was not going to place any stipulations on it. So the program was so successful and so well received that I was able to apply for and get awarded a grant from the Greater Lowell Health Alliance last fall to expand the garden. So we've now gone from 6 raised beds to 14 raised beds. And I've also formed a very informal ad hoc Food Security Advisory Council where representatives from the food pantry and from Table of Plenty and from the school system and the senior center and some other folks in the community who are working towards alleviating food insecurity, we all come together once a month and we talk about the efforts that each of us are making and how we can collaborate and cooperate and work together so that we're not duplicating efforts and we can reach as many people as possible. So through that council, we've expanded our efforts to get healthy foods to Chelmsford residents by also expanding efforts in volunteer opportunities at the community gardens in South Chelmsford. And then a resident, John Bowles, has instituted a grow-a-row program where backyard gardeners can dedicate a certain amount of space in their own gardens to grow some vegetables that can get donated to the programs.
So they would call you about that garden?
Yes, either me or John Bowles, and he has a Facebook page, a Chelmsford Grow-a-row Facebook page, so there's information on that Facebook page to be able to sign up for the program and indicate interest. And all of this is going to culminate in, I'm in the process now of securing a shed that will go in the back parking lot near where the food pantry is.
Right.
And we will run a community farm stand out of that shed. We'll be open 2 days a week, the same hours as the food pantry, so on Wednesday and Friday evenings. Folks who are participating in the Grow Our Own program will have dedicated hours to come and drop off their produce at that shed. It will get washed and sorted by volunteers. And then those 2 days a week, anybody in the community can come and pick up fresh vegetables at no charge. There will be no income verification, no requirements other than that you're a Chelmsford resident.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because then you would get other people from other communities coming in. And
Sure.
so forth, and then you wouldn't have any food for the people in Chelmsford. Do we have a number in regards to food insecurity?
Yeah, they're kind of in fluctuation because they definitely rose sharply with the pandemic.
Yep.
So I don't have an exact number for you. I do know that Table of Plenty right now each week is serving over 150 meals a week, and they're giving out over 200 bags of groceries, and that's just on one day. The food pantry, I believe the last numbers they quoted me is they have something like over 1,000 families that are visiting them every week to be able to get.
Are they all Chelmsford families? Or
they would know that, I'm not 100% sure of what their demographics are. I know that the food pantry and both Table of Plenty are also open to folks outside of Chelmsford. So my opinion is that we're not serving everybody who needs it. I think that there are many, many more people out there who are experiencing food insecurity that aren't accessing foods through Table of Plenty or the food pantry. And so we're hoping with this Security Council, Food Security Advisory Council, that we can identify more people and be able to get more food into the hands of those who need it.